we go.
So,
Thank you.
now that you've risen, please remain standing as we light our chalice with these words from Tracy Johnson. We kindle our chalice flame this morning, awakening the fire of our ancestors in our hearts. Beacon of freedom held out to light the way, light of reason illuminating our path, spark of courage igniting our spirits, aglow with hope for all we endeavor together. Holy flame of times past, brighten this present moment, that we may be the love that is our center and our foundation both. Blessed be. If you are watching on Zoom and have a chalice with you at home, we invite you to light it with us now and join in this morning's service at Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church. Please join us in our covenant. The words are first in English and then in Spanish. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, thus do we covenant. La doctrina de esta iglesia es el amor. La búsqueda de la verdad es su sacramento y el servicio es su oración. Vivir juntos en paz, buscar el conocimiento en libertad, servir a la humanidad en comunión. Este es nuestro pacto.
Please be seated. And thank you. Again, we welcome you to Emerson this morning. My name is Brian Nelson. My pronouns are he and him.
And I am Barbara Calvi. My pronouns are she and her. Brian and I joined Emerson 27 years ago this summer. And it's our pleasure to welcome you today, along with our music director, Kevin Matthey, our singers and musicians today, Mia Forbes, Philip Koretsky, Hat Palmer, and Rhonda Richard Plank. Our tech associates, Adam and Conrad Niesenholtz, our ushers and welcome desk folks, and all the other Emersonians who do so much to keep this congregation running, whether we always see them or not. Every year, Brian and I put together a worship service or two for this congregation, and we're excited to be back again this morning. Emerson acknowledges our presence on the ancestral and unceded land of the Tongva and Chumash people. California itself has more than 100 federally recognized tribes and once was the most densely populated part of native North America. We honor how Native Americans have shaped the country legally, politically, and culturally, from the earliest notions of self-governance held by British colonists to the writing of the Constitution and far beyond. We will be speaking more about the Tongva momentarily.
Emerson is one of over 1,000 UU congregations across the country, gathering to maintain our commitment to a world in which we need not all think alike in order to love alike. This morning at the UU Fellowship of Bozeman, Montana, Reverend Karen Dakotas is talking about cultivating peace and wisdom in times of distress. The UU Church of Baton Rouge is holding a gospel service on liberating joy, led by the Reverend Nathan Ryan. Sort of tempted to be there. At the Champlain Valley UU Society in Middlebury, Vermont, they are hearing a guest speaker talk about wilderness hiking in a service titled A Pilgrim and Her Spiritual Quest on the Camino de Santiago. And here at Emerson, I am speaking on the top 10 unexpected things I learned about Moses, reflecting on my experience over the last 2 years as an executive producer on a Netflix miniseries about one of the visionaries in the holy books of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the prophet Moses. The show was called Testament, the Story of Moses, For a week at Easter this year, amazingly, it was the top show on Netflix in the US and in about 5 other countries. In helping to make this show, I learned things about Moses that surprised lots of people, and also that hold some relevance for us as Unitarian Universalists. On the subject of future Sunday services, not to mention the subject of Emerson UU Church in general, we'll now turn the pulpit over to board member Tracy Watson with an important announcement.
Good morning.
Lord, I shall give these laws.
Oh my God.
He clearly approves.
For those 2 or 3 of you who actually read the emails sent out by our president, House Dow, I apologize. I'm going to be sharing and paraphrasing an announcement House has sent out recently. First, I'm going to start with the words of Michelle Collins. This will give you a clue of what's coming next. Changes abound around us, within us, between us, in our communities, our neighborhoods, and our beloved faith communities. Changes abound. May we each find the balance point we need as we move through our ever-changing world. The balance between the old and the new, between the known and the unknown, between the familiar and the perhaps bold and risky possibilities that may be there waiting. Now, for the past several months, Emerson has been in the process of looking for a new minister who will be with us for at least the next year. House and the board are pleased to announce that our search is completed, and we are excited to introduce to all of you the Reverend Chloe Breedy. Reverend Chloe joins us most recently from Pacific Unitarian Church in Rancho Palos Verdes, California, where she served as interim minister. She has previously served congregations in Augusta, Maine, Hingham, Maine, and Arlington, Massachusetts. And there's a lot more in the letter for those of you who choose to go read it. But for now, please be aware that Reverend Chloe's first service in the pulpit will be at our annual in-gathering and water communion on Sunday, September 8th. And in the meantime, she'll be starting in the office with office hours on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. The specific hours, again, are in that email. And those of you who'd like to drop by and meet Reverend Chloe and get to know her, she's happy to start to familiarize herself with all of us and with how the office works. So, congratulations, Emersonians. We have a minister.
Thank you, Tracy. And I just want to make one correction. Brian won't go back and tell you this, but he misspoke when he said it was the show was #1 in 5 other here in 5 other countries. Wow. It's actually 5 dozen, more than 5 dozen. So, but as his wife, I get to say that. He wouldn't tell you that. So, Emerson is a welcoming congregation that's been here like 70 years now, engaging on issues ranging from anti-war protests to immigration reform, to marriage equality, to climate change. Brian and I joined Emerson because we wanted a church for our kids that wouldn't be sexist, that wouldn't be shame-based, that would be about encouraging everyone to be their own spiritual authority. Emerson maintains a tradition of American spirituality stretching to the founding of this country, claiming leaders like abolitionist President John Quincy Adams and Red Cross founder Clara Barton. We also maintain a tradition of engagement and support of not only the wider world and our immediate neighborhood, but also for our beloved community here. As an example of this, our small group ministry was happy to invite people yesterday morning to a work party where we spent a fair amount of time getting our building and grounds in shape for our incoming new minister. Brian and I thank everyone who helped or participated in any way, including, in alphabetical order, Phil Davis, House Dow, Philip Koretsky, Scott Kaiser, Renee Lanson, Melissa Marotte, Carolyn Martin, Lynn Masahara, Linda Beth Nelson, Eric Schmidt, Joy Scott, and Tracy Watson. Thank you all. If you're attending for the first time, please sign our guest book in the lobby or our virtual guest book online. You'll find the link in the chat. Signing it will ensure you receive our e-blast updates, letting you know about the various upcoming activities, from social justice and environmental events to virtual committee meetings, book group meetings, and more. There's always more. We also invite you to spend some time with us after the service, either in person here in the pavilion or online. Before we greet each other, we're going to take a little moment for a look at how people thought about Moses at one point in the 1970s. Here's a clip from Mel Brooks's History of the World, Part 1.
Lord, I shall give these laws unto thy people. Hear me! Oh, hear me! All pay heed! The Lord Jehovah, has given unto you these 10 commandments for all to obey.
So, when we have taught coming of age sessions at Emerson over the years, we'll show this clip one week to our teens, and then we'll say, so if you were going to add another 5 commandments, what might those be? Now, we probably don't have time for you all to think of 5, but while we greet each other, we're going to ask you to take a moment, find one of the index cards that's around with one of the pens that's around, and write on it 1 or at most 2 new commandments that you'd like to put into the world. And we're going to read these aloud. So be thoughtful about it. This is how much we trust you. And fingers crossed, if you're on Zoom, feel free to write your extra commandment into the chat. We have had some technical difficulties this morning. I heard someone in the booth say a moment ago, that's the wrong order of service. So heaven only knows how things are going to go today, but we'll do what we can. So now let's take a moment, say hello to each other, and think about your commandment. Where's your one you gave me? Here it is. So after this, they're going to sing.
Okay.
And then I will take it from there into the, and then you'll start the poem.
But you're doing this, right?
I'll intro it, and then you'll do the first verse. I'm going to give it another minute because this runs longer than I often expect. And we'll let them write. I'm going to come down and say hi to Gail and Marjorie real fast. I guess I should put on a mask if I'm with that.
Israel was in Egypt's land. Let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go.
Down to Moses, go down,
Go down,
Moses,
Moses.
way down in Egypt land, tell Pharaoh, let my people go. The Lord told Moses what to do. Let my people go to lead the Hebrew children through. Let my people go down, Moses, go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Let my people go. Let my people go. Pharaoh said he'd go across. Let my people go. But Pharaoh and his best were lost. Let my people go down to Moses. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Let my people go.
Thank you so much. That is so wonderful. We are now going to have our story for all ages, which is written by you. We're going to collect your suggestions for new commandments. And David, early, I'm going to ask you to come down and help me with this if need be. And Barbara and I will then read them aloud. All right. I was trying to open the chat on Zoom, but it kept broadcasting the service, and we were getting a kind of stereo effect up here. So we're going to cross our fingers if we can get some of the commandments from the chat on Zoom. But here we go.
Commandment number 11, assume good intentions. Thou shalt assume good intentions.
Take action only when the future will be better because of it.
First, always be kind.
Thou shalt give their children a hug as long as both the child and parent consent. Heart.
Thou shalt clean up after your dog on the trail.
Thou shalt be curious.
People have the right to do as they choose with their own bodies, including and their own life, if sick or in unknowable physical pain.
Thou shalt not be on devices when in the presence of family and friends. Unless Brian actually asks you to look something up.
Thou shalt smile first thing in the morning, and thou shalt forgive others or forgive yourself.
Do not kill floral plants unnecessarily. Thou shalt not waste. No speaking before 12 p.m. All things treated equal.
Thou shalt be kind.
Be excellent to each other, with apologies to William S. Preston, Esquire, and Ted Theodore Logan.
Thou shalt not lie in political ads.
Be accepting, be kind.
Thou shalt not lie knowingly about my fellow human being.
Thou shalt deal kindly with one another. Thou shalt be kind to animals.
Thou shalt treat all people with respect and acknowledge their dignity.
Protect and revere our interdependent web of all existence.
Thou shalt treat other people with generosity in the way you'd want to be treated.
Thou shalt forgive. Thou shalt, I'm gonna say maybe there's a word missing here.
It's probably not.
I'm gonna say there's a not missing here. It says thou shalt throw stones at people, but
It's probably thou shalt not throw stones at people.
Choose your own adventure.
Thou shalt be kind to the oppressed.
Eat your veggies, mindful plant-based eating.
Thou shalt take a moment of meditation when it's convenient.
A moment of thanks before driving each day.
A convicted felon shall not be president.
Encourage each other.
Welcome the stranger and immigrant. Love thy neighbor.
Thou shalt pursue all paths that seek peace and justice, honor our land and earth. How are we doing with the chat?
I have two.
Great.
I'm gonna invite you up to the mic so people can hear you on Zoom.
Okay, I guess I'll go this way. Hi, everyone. David Early. My pronouns are he and him. Guest chat reader. Amy Noel says, apologize promptly when indicated. Linda Beth Nelson says, base opinions on good evidence and be willing to change upon better evidence. Understand others may have different perspectives from different experiences. Susan Siskin says, no one should be allowed to be a billionaire when people are starving.
And just to wrap this story section up on a high note, another thing that we typically would share in this lesson in our coming of age class would be this classic poem that's sort of commandments by Max Ehrmann, written in 1927. If you're of my generation, you might remember this being hugely popular when you were a teenager. It's called Desiderata.
Go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons.
Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even to the dull and ignorant. They too have their story.
Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexatious to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself.
Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time.
Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere is full of heroism.
Be yourself. Especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass.
Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth.
Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune, but do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness.
Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here.
And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive it to be. And whatever your labors and aspirations, in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul.
With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful, strive to be happy.
And we started this tradition decades ago that after the story, the kids could leave the sanctuary for their own time, and we would see them out with this unison affirmation that we still do today, no matter who's present in any given service. So you know the hand gestures I'm going to trust. Here is please join me in our unison affirmation. We are Unitarian Universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and welcoming hands.
Part of having loving hearts and welcoming hands is building this beloved community together. And one of the ways we do that is to contribute to this congregation through pledges and through our weekly offering. You can donate to us through the online app or through the link for donate.emersonuuc.org, or you can mail in a check to the church office. This month, we are sharing our offering with the Tongva Parahat Pahava Conservancy. This Tongva-led organization was created to steward lands in Tovangar, the traditional Tongva region, encompassing the greater Los Angeles area basin. The Conservancy has received land back, is creating community and housing Native people, practicing ceremony, archiving, and rematriating the land. The offering will now be gratefully received, after which we will join in our group response.
From you I receive, to you I give, Together we share, and from this we live. As important as it is when we share our offerings, just as crucial is how we strengthen our beloved community through sharing our personal milestones. Let's take a moment to hear joys and sorrows that have been submitted in the Book of Life. The Calvi Nelson family is thrilled to announce that we are celebrating Olivia's completion of her Master's of Social Work this week. Renee Lansone writes, so wonderful to see our former Emersonians, Gail and Marjorie, with us this morning. How are we on the chat, David? We have one in the chat.
In the online virtual Book of Life, Nicole, for today, writes, joy to finally have COVID out of the house after 3 weeks. Everyone is recovering, including the caregiver.
We offer up into the sanctuary those names of people in our lives and around the world whom we wish remembered this morning. Let's take a moment during this moment to speak those names into the space around us. I ask you to hold these names and all these joys and sorrows in your hearts, as well as those that are yet too tender to be put forth. For our sung meditation, I invite you to either sing along or simply close your eyes and relax as our musicians perform hymn number 391. We'll sing it through twice, voice still and small. Still and small,
Deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still we remain, singing. Calming our fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Thank you. That was beautiful, as always. Let us now share responsive reading number 593. It'll be on the screens, and it's in the gray hymnal as well. I will read the text in regular font, and the congregation will respond with the text in the italicized font. Liberation is costly. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, they had to travel through the desert. There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining. Many of them preferred the days of bondage and the flesh pots of Egypt.
It needs unity.
We must hold hands and refuse to be divided. We must be ready. But these people will have contributed to the struggle.
Let us be united. Let us be filled with hope. Let us be those who respect one another. So, when I said I would do a sermon on August 18th, I didn't know at that time that the theme of the church services for the month would be wisdom. So the bar was raised unexpectedly high for me. I will do what I can. Many of you know that I write for film and television for a living, but I am not usually involved with spiritual stories. I write thrillers. I write horror and science fiction and drama. I write what's called genre. So it was really unusual to find myself hired to executive produce Testament, the story of Moses. And in this process, I kept learning things about Moses that just felt wild, and I started to keep a list for myself, top 10 wildest things about Moses. Because there are 10, it will be handy for you to keep track of how close to the end of this sermon I am. I was raised in the United Methodist Church, which I usually say was innocuous enough as these things go. My mom was one of the Sunday school teachers. So I got a good grounding in most of the classic Bible stories. I was sent to vacation Bible school in the summer, all of that. So I knew the account in Exodus that the Pharaoh of Egypt had declared that there were too many Hebrews. And so all of the Hebrew baby boys should be killed. Moses' mother, Jochebed, hid Moses away. And when she couldn't hide him anymore, she placed him in a watertight basket, a sort of miniature ark. It's actually it's described using some of the same language that is used earlier in the Bible to describe Noah's ark. This basket was sent down the Nile. Moses' mother, Miriam, followed the basket, made sure that it would be found by an Egyptian princess. There are debates about the origin of his name, but the logic of the legend is that this Egyptian princess gave him an Egyptian name, Moses, meaning from the water. And we know, of course, that Moses would be later quite famous, among other things, for a big day involving lots of water. There's also some debate about whether Moses knows he's Hebrew while growing up. The writers that I was working with, they and I all agreed it was the most dramatic and realistic choice, that of course you wouldn't expect a child to be able to keep a secret like that for decades, not even if it means his life. So in our view, Moses grows up understandably thinking he's Egyptian, but he sees how the Hebrew slaves are being whipped and mistreated. And Moses loses it. He kills an Egyptian taskmaster. And then he knows he will be in trouble for this crime. There's a lot of great details here, but I am tightening things because I don't have a 6-hour miniseries length this morning. But he runs away from Egypt into the pagan land of Midian. Now, I do want to make clear, I didn't write this show myself. The writers were from London. They were very accomplished talents who had been hired by this international production company. But Netflix said, we would also like an American who has some show running experience, who can be the liaison between the writers and the network and the shoot and the team of rabbis, Islamic chaplains, ministers, teachers, Egyptologists, and other historians who are consulting with us on this. So I spent months and months talking to all of these people about our story and getting their feedback and questions and concerns in plentiful number. So there's one point where I'm talking about how Moses has killed the taskmaster, and he gets scared and runs away. And this expert on the Quran tells me, why would he be scared? Because he confesses the murder to God, and God forgives him right there, and then tells him he still has to leave to protect his life. But it's a story about love and forgiveness. Why wouldn't you want to tell that story? And I was in the awkward position of saying, I see and I hear how inspiring and touching that is. And we are dramatists, and our focus is always going to be about drama and conflict. We are trying to tell the most human story, the version of Moses' story that we've ever seen. So I came to learn unexpected thing number 10, which is that the Quran tells the story differently. And the differences are almost always that God is kinder in the Quran. A lot of the harsh things that we associate with the Old Testament God, they are not in the Quran. You know all about the 10 plagues. Well, in the Quran, there are only 5. And they're the nicer, easier plagues. There's no plague of darkness. There's no death of the firstborn. This was a big revelation to me, that the Quran, yes, it is far less dramatic, but it is far more gentle as a religious text. This led me to unexpected thing number 9. I learned a lot about the hadith, the extra stories from the Prophet Muhammad that are not in the Quran. Sometimes you hear the word extra Quranic to describe these. And Moses is in one of those stories. God tells Muhammad that his people must pray 50 times a day. And Muhammad also talks to Moses, and Moses says, that's too many. Talk him down. So Muhammad says, Moses told me I should ask for 40. God says, okay. Moses still thinks that's too many. So God and Moses are each talking to Muhammad, and Muhammad goes back and forth between them, negotiating it down 10 times, until finally God says, all right, 5 times a day. How is that? And even then, Moses says, try again. But Muhammad, by this point, is like, no, 5 is fine. I'm going to stop there. So Muslims have Moses to thank for the fact that they only have to pray 5 times a day. Pretty amazing. So back to the story of Moses. He works as a shepherd and then a foreman for a priest of Midian named Jethro. He marries Jethro's oldest daughter, Zipporah. And all right, maybe this is not gigantically important, but every time you're in a mall, you pass a reference to this. Unexpected thing number 8 is that Zipporah's name is also translated in some places as Sephora. So that high-end makeup store you always pass, Sephora, that is a biblical reference right there in your life. It's intriguing to me to think about how Moses is in what some people would call a mixed marriage. It's not really how we normally discuss this patriarch. Arguably, part of why he is able to lead the people forward is because he is someone who has walked in many worlds, been part of many cultures. He receives instruction and moral legacies from Hebrew, Egyptian, and pagan culture. Moses lives with Zipporah many years. He describes himself famously as a stranger in a strange land. And they have sons, and so here is unexpected thing number 7. Moses names his first son Gershom, a word which means stranger. Now, look, I don't know about you. When we named our kids, we gave them names that we thought were lovely and inspiring. I don't know what it would feel like to say, yeah, my dad named me Stranger. But arguably that is part of what makes Moses unique. Again, he's been of many worlds, but he never feels like he belongs in any of them. And then one day Moses sees this light on Mount Sinai. He goes up to see what it is. It's the famous burning bush speaking to him with the voice of Yahweh. Yahweh tells him, "You're going to free the Hebrews. You are my emissary." And Moses tries to talk his way out of it. And here's unexpected thing number 6. Moses spends so much time trying to get out of having to be the spokesman for the Lord that at one point his excuse is that he is unskilled in speech. But in the King James Version, this verse reads that he claims to have uncircumcised lips. What does this mean? Some people think it means Moses had a speech impediment. There's a whole school of literature called Midrash, which are the stories and legends that rabbis devised to explain or elaborate on puzzling things in Scripture. And there's a story in Midrash about how baby Moses burned his mouth one day, but in a way that showed how wise he was. It's a long story, but as dramatists, we preferred the idea Moses is overwhelmed by the task. It feels very human that he'd say anything to get out of it. But also maybe the whole uncircumcised lips things means that he doesn't think he should speak for the Hebrews because, again, very possibly he hasn't known that he's a Hebrew. Maybe even, unlike the Hebrews, he's not circumcised. Was he? More on this in a moment, but this is a detail the network wondered if maybe we don't address that part. So Moses follows the Lord's instructions, takes his family to Goshen, where the Hebrews live, just on the outskirts of Egypt. And he meets his mother, Jochebed, now as an adult, and he meets his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam. Miriam turns out to be really important. There's a whole section of Exodus that Miriam sings, which might be the oldest fragment of the Bible. She's a fascinating character. Unexpected thing number 5 is that the Bible describes Moses' sister Miriam as a prophet, yet doesn't actually use that term for Moses. And yet, later, when Miriam suggests maybe, therefore, she deserves a little more respect, the Lord afflicts her with a skin disease. Now, she gets better, but there are quiet tensions all through the Torah about who really has the experience to lead. Moses usually wins these debates because, as the Bible makes clear, Moses had a relationship with Yahweh that was different from all others. Verses say that he spoke to the Lord as a friend, face to face. Later on, when the Lord is really upset with the Hebrews, he says to Moses at one point, "Maybe I will just wipe them all out and start over with your family." And Moses talks him down, says effectively, "Come on, how's that going to look?" Now we get into the part of the story that Charlton Heston made famous. Moses takes up the mission he's been given. He goes to Pharaoh and he says, "Let my people go." Pharaoh refuses. So God makes it clear he's going to make an example of Pharaoh. He famously hardens Pharaoh's heart, and there's extensive theological debate about what does that mean. But he sends 10 plagues. The Nile and all the water in Egypt turns to blood. Then there are frogs, lice, and flies. Then all the livestock die. God is making a point. There's boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and finally death of the firstborn, which is the origin of the Passover story. We were proud of ourselves, actually, on the show because we took a moment to show each plague in the show. Most dramas skip over some of them because it is hard to keep the tension alive when you know it's just a lot of grief coming. But here I learned unexpected thing number 4, which is I never really thought before about the plague of darkness. I used to think, oh, it's dark. That's rough. I never realized until I inspected the scripture and the Midrash that the Egyptians cannot even light a match for 3 days. It just goes out. There's no sun, no moon, no stars, no fire, no lamps. You are effectively blind for 3 days. You would think the world was ending. There's a reason it's the next to the last plague. It truly feels apocalyptic. Eventually, Pharaoh gives in after the 10th plague, so Moses and the Hebrews get ready to leave. The Egyptians are so ready for the Hebrews to be gone. They offer them gold, jewelry, take it, please, just leave. In the passage where they're packing up, I learned unexpected thing number 3, which is that before they leave Egypt, Moses is required to bring along the bones of Joseph to be buried in the promised land. And how are we going to find them? Well, this centuries-old woman named Sarah tells him that you have to write, based on the version you read, you have to write either Joseph's or the Lord's name on a stone, throw it into the Nile, whereupon the coffin of Joseph will magically rise from the bottom of the Nile. We didn't have the time or the money to do this in our show, which is a shame because it's some real Spielberg stuff, right? But Moses then leads the Hebrews out of Egypt. He parts the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, depending on your translation. Pharaoh chases him, gets drowned when the waters return to normal. The Hebrews are free, but now they're out in the wilderness. They don't have a lot going for them. Moses leads them back to Mount Sinai so he can ask the Lord what next. And when he goes up there, he disappears for 40 days. And the mountain kind of explodes. You look at the verses, it sounds like a volcano. There is fire and rain and ash and thunder. And you would think, if you're at the base of the mountain, Moses must be dead, right? So when the Hebrews decide to build the golden calf, it's not a crazy pagan orgy decision like in Cecil B. DeMille. They have lost their leader. And the tribes around here worship different gods, so maybe we better look like we fit in. They melt down the gold jewelry they were given by the Egyptians. They forge it into the shape of a calf. Unexpected thing number 2 is that in some versions, the calf is made with a hollow inside so that the wind will pass through it, which will let the golden calf moo. This is one of these details we thought we would leave out of the show, you know? We just weren't sure how that would be received. But Moses comes back. He sees the golden calf. He is bitterly disappointed. He smashes the stone tablets he brought with him. So later, his people have to reconstruct them. And then it turns out God has a lot more commandments. If you read all of Exodus, they're not just 10 at the end of the day. And as they lay down all the many, many laws, a lot of it will lead to Moses sometimes being pretty violent and vindictive in the books of Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. But with the arrival of the Ten Commandments, the Moses story, as we know it, reaches its natural climax. A man who led his people out of bondage, and not only that, taught them how to survive when liberated. One of my favorite observations in the show came from the black theologian Bishop Andy Luter, who told us, what it takes to get free is different from what it takes to stay free. All right, so now I'm going to go back and tell you unexpected thing number one. This is real scripture, Exodus 4:24. This is right after Moses has been given the mission to go talk to the Hebrews and lead them out of bondage. At a lodging place along the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off his foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me," she said. So the Lord let him alone. And she said, "A bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision." What is happening here? The Lord shows up not like a burning bush, but like a murderous stranger. The verb to kill is the same verb used in Cain's murder of Abel. But then he's satisfied by the circumcision. And who got circumcised? Most people translate it as Gershom, but the pronouns are very unclear. Maybe it's Moses. Who is her bridegroom here? Moses, or maybe the Lord? How does this pagan woman know how to do this? People say this is the most inexplicable thing in the whole Bible. We tried to film a scene we wrote for this material. We did not succeed. We could not assemble a version that made any sense to people. And the most amazing thing, unexpected thing number one, is the midrash on this episode, which is this episode is referred to as either the bridegroom of blood or as Zipporah at the inn. There's this rabbinical explanation of how Zipporah knew how to do it, which is that Moses is briefly swallowed by a giant snake, except for the part of him that will need to be circumcised. And then God says to the snake, okay, so you can spit him out now after the circumcision. So we learn that Scripture to this day is both fascinating and mysterious. And that brings me to finally how I got this job in the first place. The producers and I got along really well, so after we talked for an hour, I said something I've never said in a job interview before. Well, listen, I know you're not legally allowed to ask me this, but maybe you should know I am a Unitarian Universalist. And then, like we all do, I tried to explain to them what a UU is. And so I shared my favorite quotation on the topic. A former president of the UUA, William Schultz, later the head of Amnesty International, said, "As UUs, we respect the answers that other faiths have found to the mystery of existence, but we respect the mystery more." And so I said, this might let me flow between Christians and Jews and Muslims talking about Moses for a whole year, because I won't feel like I had to say to them, well, you're wrong. I can be a neutral party in all this. I believe that what everyone knows might be a part of the truth. So the sweetest thing that I learned through all of this and knew is that UUs have something special to give to the world. We believe that what everyone knows could be a part of the truth, and we continue on a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. With that, let us turn to our closing hymn. We are dancing Sarah's circle. It is number 212 in the gray hymnal. One change, we will change the words at the end of each verse from the gendered ending of sisters, brothers, all. We will do a non-binary version, which is family, neighbors, all. And our family and neighbors will lead us. Thank you. You may be seated. We will extinguish our chalice now with these words from Ma Teresa Gustillo Gallardo. May we respond better to risks and dangers with a beloved community who can be counted on as a woven basket that encompasses the gifts for protection, for honor, for ceremony, and for expressions of interconnectedness. May we prevail in our intentions to make a gift of the world to the next generations of beings living and non-living that help it all come together for good. Shalom, salam, namaste, alleluia, blessed be.